if I'm getting audio. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, we're going live on YouTube, so we are streaming live now.
Go ahead and close it now.
Hey, Herb, how are you? Can't hear you.
I said, I'm good.
Oh, okay.
I'm in Arkansas.
You are good.
Yeah.
I think Ross just came back from there. Y'all didn't pass each other, did you?
Well, I didn't see him.
A quick 2-night trip to Bentonville. So
Yeah.
Is Mary or Amy allowed to talk?
Was that some Walmart business, Ross?
actually, bike business. The grandsons of the Walmart of Sam Walton have dumped millions upon millions of dollars into building out a trail system in Northwest Arkansas, and it really has become like one of the top 3 places to mountain bike. So there was a as yet unreleased bike coming out that we got to go see, and so yeah, went up there for that. So
You
Sounds
had
awesome.
to go up there and take a bike trip then, huh?
that's the business, I can't complain.
Well, it looks like we're well over our quorum numbers. Do we need to do a roll call to convene the meeting?
Yes, let's do a roll call.
All right.
Okay, I'll start. Benjamin Gomez,
Here.
Enid Wade,
Here.
Jason Ramos,
Here.
Judd Cole,
Here.
Jeremy Vickers, Joe Mayfield,
Here.
Josh Forderud,
Here.
Kim Kazanis, Pete Gretzinger.
Here.
Oh, sorry. Pete Gretzinger,
Here.
Ray Jefferson, Ross Harris,
Here.
Tara Briscoe,
Present.
David Mercer,
Here.
Herb Cross,
Here.
Ken Cooper, Scott Bland.
Here.
I talked to Ken at 11:30. What's going to be on?
All right. Well, it appears we have a quorum, so let's call the meeting of the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee to order. And I believe this is our final meeting in which we need to make recommendations to the City Council. And I believe we've got a presentation all ready to go there. So I will turn it over to our presenters here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Yeah, we're going to follow up on our discussion from last Wednesday. Again, thank you all for meeting again. This is our 7th meeting and our last meeting. It has been a process, and we do appreciate all y'all's time, because I know it's taken quite a bit of time to go through all this. We're gonna start. Jessica, we're going to start up with some follow-up from some questions from our discussion on Wednesday. Staff had mentioned we were going to get some more feedback from the Chamber of Commerce. Chris Collins, their Senior Vice President of Economic Development, took some time out to go over our policy considerations and gave us some really good feedback. And we've actually amended part of our recommendation based on that feedback, and it's gearing towards the legacy business or existing businesses that are expanding or relocating within the city limits. to exempt them from impact fees. And this would be in line with the discussion we had about small businesses. Originally, we had some criteria in there, and it said that the business had to be operating within the city limits for a period of 5 years. Chris made the point, when you have a startup business, a lot of their growth happens in the first couple of years of their existence. And if they're doing well, that growth is going to happen. They're going to need a larger facility or potential more space way before 5 years. So she recommended changing that down to 2 years. And that would help some of these small businesses that may be in an existing space that have outgrown it due to success and need a larger space and needing to build. So we have reduced that from 5 years to 2 years. And then at the bottom, we had a condition in there, criteria that we need verification of total number of jobs. And then it used to say, salaries need to be at or above. But she did say usually when a business is growing and you're adding employees, usually a lot of the employees you're adding start off at a lower pay range and then work their way up. And so she recommended that be tied to the compensation per comparable position. So if you had a line worker, the line worker's compensation would need to be equal to the line worker's pay or compensation at the original location. And so you're comparing apples to apples instead of overall. So we thought those were two good points made. So we have adjusted our recommendation to include that for existing businesses. Any questions or comments on that? Okay.
Josh, I was going to ask, with those changes, is Chris Collins endorsing, approving the language?
I don't think they're going to come out and give an endorsement of it, but the feedback we got from her was they were comfortable with the way it was written. With these suggestions, we've met with her twice to get some general input up when we first started this, and then to review our final staff recommendation. And these were the 2 points she suggested some modifications to it, but otherwise she didn't have any other comments or concerns about the way the policy was written.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I think I called you Josh. I didn't address you correctly. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. Been called lots worse than that. And then another request was to look at our peer cities. And so we did, this is the list of peer cities we usually look at, especially with development issues or ordinance changes or whatnot. And you can see there's about 15 of them. Comparable size cities, we got the population there. We did put the growth rate. Again, typically impact fees are used in communities that are growing that need to help with adding additional infrastructure to accommodate growth. So there's quite a few of our peer cities that are not growing at the rate we are. If you look at our growth rates since 2010, and these are 2018 numbers, so you could argue that our growth rate is even higher now. But these you can see Waco's at 11.6% growth rate since 2010. And then if you look at like Abilene, Amarillo, Beaumont, Wichita Falls, those cities have either very low growth or stagnant growth. And then there are some that have been growing, but if you look at the cities that have the highest rates of growth, like College Station, Denton, Midland, Georgetown, those cities that have the highest rate of growth do have the impact fees. And so I think that is an indication that impact fees have not had a negative impact on economic growth. In the state of Texas, there's impact fees have been around since 1987. And a lot of our metro cities have impact fees. And, Texas ranks as one of the highest states in the nation with economic development growth. So I think this is an indication, that impact fees, with all things, other things considered, to have a minimal impact on the overall economic growth of the city. There are some other cities considering impact fees, like Colleen and Lubbock and Odessa. Colleen is looking at roadway impact fees. They did have a vote on them last year. It was I believe it was a 4-3 vote to not approve them, but they are looking at reconsidering them. Lubbock and Odessa are just starting their processes. Lubbock's a little bit further along than Odessa. You can see that cities that do have impact fees, we are below what we're proposing on our fees are below. Again, College Station being, I guess, the city that we have kind of honed in on as a most similar comparison. You can see that these are for residential, single family residential. Their rate is $5,000. Denton is $12,000. Georgetown is $10,000. Midland has a low rate for single family, but their non-residential rates are through the roof. They have really high non-residential rates. Any question on this information?
Clint,
No,
did you
this
do
was-
the same spreadsheet with non-residential? These are residential fees.
We
Did you do the
don't
impact fees
have,
for non-residential?
we don't have all of these cities on non-residential. Remember, a couple of meetings ago, we had those bar charts that kind of showed what some of your peer cities were doing. So we have a few of those in the back of the presentation, but it doesn't include everyone on this list. We can look at those if we want to. They haven't been updated, but I do have them available. If we, you want me to go to those, Clint?
Sure.
They still have the old phasing for, let's see, they're way back here. Okay. This is single family home. Then we had the hotel. And I just want to say that the Waco fee, that the maximum is the same and 2024, I believe, but we changed the way we were phasing this. But this will at least give us an idea of what some of, what some of our other peers are doing. Let me go back to that. There we go. So we've got Georgetown on here. We have Denton on here.
We had originally had
College
Midland on
Station.
these, but the Midland non-residential were so high, we felt like it wasn't a fair comparison.
Yeah, it was their roadway impact fee was what was really, really high. And then we had the grocery store example, so you can kind of see what Round Rock, Denton, College Station down here is doing. Georgetown without roadway, but they are considering roadway right now, so theirs could go up higher. And we had light industrial. So you can just see that, especially on the roadway piece, a lot of these peer cities, their non-residential is very high.
And even on ours, that was the biggest variable for most of ours was the roadway, and that's why we put in the roadway exemptions and caps the way we did.
Yeah. Is that helpful?
If I could add, Clint, Jessica, I spoke with Carol Cotter, the Impact Fee Program Director over in College Station last Friday, to ask her that the question, the $100,000 question, if there was any impact to some of the small businesses. They have not done any kind of before or after study. And one of the main reasons for that is A&M had just finished a major expansion of dorm space. They added like 15,000 dorm rooms. And so they can just see, nothing has really slowed down, but they have not done a formal study per se to see if there was an impact one way or the other, but it's too hard to tell with all the stuff going on at A&M. So, but that's one of the things that they are programming to do. They are scheduled for their first generational update. At least they're going to start it in fiscal year 2021. the water wastewater had been in place a lot longer than the roads. And so they're just going to wrap in a new road along with the water wastewater update.
And then the last topic that we wanted to give you some more information was the impact on small businesses. And I know square footage, you can have a larger square footage for a small business, but we pulled some building permit data for the last 5 years for all new construction for buildings under 5,000 square feet, back to 2016 through present. And under those criteria, there was 37 total permits. 4 of those were tied to schools, which are exempt under our policy. 16 were national or regional change. Most of those would be fast food restaurants. We had 16 that I would consider small businesses. And then of those 16, 9 were in that commercial core or our traditional transportation corridors that we've identified for economic development through our tax abatement policy. And so we wanted to give you a couple examples of these. These are real world that have been permitted, built in Waco, on what their fees would be. And hopefully that would help with some of the discussion on the small business question. Jessica, you gonna run through those examples?
Yeah, I've got it. The first example that we pulled, and like Clint said, these are real life examples. So we had about 1,500 square feet of a restaurant that is going to be in roadway service area 1, and it is in the commercial core area where we have the policy cap of 50% on non-residential development. So when we go through the calculation, this restaurant would be assessed about $14,000 impact fee. The collection rate is $8,000. And because it is in that commercial core zone, we take the 50% credit. So it comes down to just $4,000 for this example of the restaurant. And the construction cost on that was estimated at $150,000. Any questions on this?
Yeah, Jessica, can you explain to me, so what's the difference between the assessment and then the collection? Just to clarify.
So the impact fee will be assessed on the maximum calculated impact fee. So you'll remember we went through those calculations, water, wastewater, roadway. So this is the maximum, and we assess it on the maximum amount. And that's done at the time of what's the word I'm looking for, Clint? It's
Platting.
Thank you, Eddie. It's assessed at the time of platting, and then it's collected at the time of building permit. And with the assessment, that just means that in the future, if there is an update that sets our collection rate higher, it could be collected at a rate up to the assessment. So it's assessed at this amount, and then when it comes in for the building permit, that's when it's collected, and this is the collection rate. Does that make sense and answer your question?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you.
And I wanted to add one more thing about that. So that 4,018 is what's automatically credited. So, but there is an opportunity because what we're proposing is to amend the tax abatement program to include potential impact fee waivers. And in that policy that was adopted by council at the end of 2019, the goal, there was some criteria added in there for small businesses within that same core area that we're showing on our maps. And the hopes are encouraging new development in those areas where we've had historically underutilized property. And so developments like this that are in that area can also request fee waivers through that tax abatement program. And the thresholds are a lot less for areas for development or businesses within that area. And so our general tax abatement policy is usually just for kind of your primary sector jobs, your industrial jobs, but our policy for this area, the core area and those commercial corridor areas, does open it up for retail and restaurants or whatnot. And then the thresholds are very low. So the minimum thresholds to be able to apply for those are 2,000 square feet building, and you can you just need one of these. You don't have to have all three. 2,000 square feet in building size, 2 or more employees, or $100,000 in real property investment. So this example here, the 4,000 would be automatic. They wouldn't have to apply for anything, but they could also, under the tax abatement policy that will amend to include fee waivers, they can also apply for fee waivers to city council to act on for the full amount. And so I just wanted to add that this is in line with our economic development tax abatement policy.
Hey, Clint, just a clarifying question. So you said that they don't have to meet every single stipulation. They can meet one, but not the other two, correct?
That's correct. Correct.
What does the percentage mean? So if we took the new structure expansion and we're saying it's expanding 2,000 of, nearly 5,000 square feet, 40% abatement, is that 40% of what they would normally collect in tax? Or
right, yeah, for the tax abatement policy, that's what that 40% is 40% of taxes. So the fee waiver will have some language in there too that will address fee waivers as well.
Okay.
All right, Jessica, you want to go to the next example?
Yep. So our next example is just under 5,000 square feet of office space, and this is located in roadway service area 9. So in service area 9, we don't have any sort of special policy or exemptions. So it's going to be assessed at $53,000. And then our collection rate on this would be $31,496. And the construction cost on the office was $530,000. That's another example. And then our final example we have is a just over 2,000 square feet of Pottery Studio. And it is in service area 1 and in our commercial core area. So the roadway impact fee is obviously going to be the lowest one here, with service area 1 being just $6 rate. So it's assessed at $14,000. The collection rate would be just over $8,000. And then with our policy cap for the commercial core, this would end up being just over $4,000 for the impact fee. And the cost of construction on the Pottery Studio is $320,000.
In this particular scenario, we had to do a little research on specialty retail, specialty boutique type operation. We had to kind of go back into some of the older generations of, or editions of the trip generation manual. IT's, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, they've kind of collapsed a bunch of some of the smaller land uses. And so we went back, but that's kind of really to point out that in unique situations, there may be the need to do some research on data, and or if the applicant has some studies or data of kind of traffic that they generate, that they could present that information to the city staff, the city engineer, for consideration in the assessment and the collection of the impact fee.
So we'll open it up for discussion. I think we feel pretty good about our recommendations, and especially with the existing or legacy business exemption, and then the potential reduction or waivers for core business that covers a lot of the small business concerns that the commission members have, along with staff. We obviously don't want to do anything that would inhibit small business growth in Waco. So with that, we'll open up with discussions and go from there.
Before I close out the PowerPoint, Clint, do you want to just kind of remind everyone that last week we took action on this first bullet point, and what we would be talking about today is possibly also recommending the policy considerations that we've been discussing.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Yeah, so the charge of the advisory committee is to give recommendations to the city council, which includes the land use assumption, capital improvements plan, and the impact fee calculations, which we've already done at our last meeting, and then give council recommendation on policy considerations. And so what we've sent y'all and what we have in the PowerPoint is staff's recommendation, and the committee can go along with staff recommendations or make amendments to that and then have a different recommendation. It's certainly the commission's purview to do that.
With that, I'm going to stop sharing so that we can have our discussion.
I would like to ask a question, if I may, please. It's Ken Cooper. It appears to me that roadway impact fees are the biggest potential number that can be applied that's variable. We've kind of set a number for both the water and the sewer, and those seem to be pretty much consistent. But roadway by area changes significantly or can change significantly. And my question would be, how long will those funds be able to be held before the roads have to be improved that have been specifically identified as creating the impact or the necessary funds from the impact of those roads?
So the impact fee legislation 395 is a little gray in that area because it always says except for roadways. However, the general rule of thumb is if the city's collecting monies, they need to be spending it. So as monies are obviously first in, first out, as monies are being collected and there's the project is designed, it's ready to go, they can expend funds toward that. But there's really no stipulation as it relates to roads, but general rule of thumb, as long as they're spending money that's being collected on projects, those specific projects on the impact fee program list.
Well, I was going to say the roadway impact fees are based on specific projects. Is that not correct?
That is correct. The CIPs, and that's why there's variation in all the service areas.
So as those CIPs or those particular projects are done, will the rates potentially then be reduced in certain areas if there are no more specific impacts for roads?
Great question. So remember the calculation is on a unit cost basis. So within each service area, although the capital projects are combined, there's the total capital cost divided by the future growth in that area. So it's on a unit cost basis. As long as there's excess capacity, in other words, those projects are built, but if there's still excess capacity in those projects, the city will still be able to collect on that remaining excess portion. So they'll still be collecting on those. The other thing is when a project is complete, the actual costs go in there. So in other words, we've developed cost estimates. We've been conservative in our cost estimating, but once those projects are on the ground, the database needs to reflect those actual costs. Okay, that's to prevent any kind of double dipping or anything like that.
And then after that, the 5-year window, that will all be reevaluated, weighted and recalculated.
The other thing there, Ken, is that not every project was in there. You know, thinking about Service Area 7, there were a handful of projects kind of in that growth area. There's still other projects that could have been put on there. So some may come off, others may be included. But generally, if there's still excess capacity to collect on those, then the city can do so. So what is excess capacity? Once traffic consumes all that capacity, 2 counts, all that capacity that's available on a road, then that project has to come out.
And we did try to put projects in there that we felt like have a realistic chance of being built during that time period. Not all of them are going to be, but you know, these are all projects that are you know, kind of beyond where, you know, needing to be built based on the traffic demands and capacity needs for them.
One other final thought on that is that, and Clinton mentioned it, not all the projects are going to be implemented at one time. They're going to be over time. Even individual projects may be implemented in phases. If it's a 4-lane roadway, they may build half of the project now, build the other half later, or adding on lanes as demand warrants, those kinds of things.
I guess one example, you know, that we're moving forward with is actually on the list was Mars Drive, kind of there by the high school, by Midway High School in the industrial district. We had that on the list. We're moving forward with that project with some other funding sources. So that would be a project that would come off the the impact fee list when it's finished. Any other questions or comments?
Was there any more thought about some sort of review committee for anybody that was wanting to challenge staff's decision? I think at one point we talked about maybe this committee being an adjustment or variance board.
Yeah, our legal department's looking at that. We're currently, it's written for the city council to be that review committee to act on variances. They're looking at that potential of it being another committee or commission, and we're going to give some feedback when we take that ordinance to city council for action.
My sense of, our questions and our conversation in the last several meetings has been that there seems to be kind of a broad consensus and agreement on the impact fees implementation when it comes to residential, but commercial has been kind of the broad area that we have really, we don't have consensus on. And I guess I'd like to hear from our representatives from the builder community to just kind of hear where y'all are at. I know you may not all be in lockstep, but I'm just trying to see if you can share with the committee your thoughts on what's been presented and where you're at on this.
I mean, I think I agree, Josh. I think on the residential side, I do think still for us on the residential side, it is still important for us to have the cost per meter to extend up to that, include a 1-inch meter. We had that discussion at our last meeting, so I'm not gonna belabor that point. But aside from that, I know that we've discussed this enough amongst us and the construction side. We still feel as though there has not been enough time spent or research done on the commercial side. I think it warrants, you hit on it, Josh. One thing we keep going back to in all these meetings is it's a back and forth discussion on the commercial side. I just, let the other guys, the construction side, chime in their opinion. My opinion is still that we should recommend to table the commercial impact fees until such time as we can do some more research on it, have some more substantive meetings on this instead of Zoom meetings, and look at introducing that to council late spring, early summer, when some more time can be spent on that. It's just, there's a lot at stake on the commercial side, and I don't think it's being given the amount of time that it should be.
So kind of proposing somewhat of a 6-month time to study this more formally and in depth on the commercial side.
Yeah, recommend moving forward to council with the residential impact fees as we've discussed, and then recommending to table council consideration of commercial impact fees for a 6-month period, so that those discussions and that research can be done to make sure we're not doing more harm than good.
Is that thanks so much, Scott. Is that a perspective shared, Herb, David, and Ken?
I would agree with that. I think that's something that comes up to me that we still have questions. I felt better about the examples that were given today, Jessica. Thank you for that. But still I just think every time we look at this more closely, we find more questions that may come up that create some concerns, and we just don't want to pass something and say, yeah, we're for this, and then come back and say, well, I didn't realize it was going to mean that, because we just didn't think of that at the time.
I agree with Scott. I do believe needs to be much more study on the commercial end. The effect of the impact fees can be quite large, and you start adding $8, $10, $12 a square foot on those smaller construction projects, that'll put you out. That'll put them going somewhere else or not being able to do their project. And we need to be sure that that's what we want.
I think that makes all 4 of us on the builder side unanimous in our thought process.
I guess it sounds to me, if you could summarize what the builders have said to us as a committee, is there's kind of a approval for that second bullet point, approval as to residential, and recommendation of 6-month delay for further study as to non-residential. I'm wondering if we've got any essentially plan commission members that have got some comment to share or a perspective on that as well. I know there were some concerns raised about entrepreneurship and new businesses last session among the plan commission members as well.
Mr. Chairman, it's Joe Mayfield. I've seen a lot over and over again where a request for additional information basically just cause you to put off a hard decision. And my guess is that, if we go that way, we're going to come up to the middle of the 5th month or 6th month, right where we are now. Yeah, I say we, it's y'all. So it would probably be my thought to go ahead and go as it's been presented.
This is Enid Wade. My question would be, because as I understand it, we're both somewhat conservative in terms of the amounts. We're consistent with what other cities are doing. And so what specifically would we be studying? What question would we be answering? What data would we be getting? Because I think there's no question it will have an impact. It's going to be an additional cost. But beyond that, I guess I'm just trying to understand what specifically would we get that would cause us to go in a different direction. And I think the reference was, we certainly don't want to have an unintended consequence, but we know it's going to have some additional cost, and for some people that may be a problem. But again, just understanding specifically what we would be getting, and in the absence of that, I would agree with Joe.
And I would make the point that, yes, we have peer cities who have enacted fees that we've looked at and we're on par with, or we're under those, but we're missing the point that there are a great many peer cities that don't have fees at all that we would be going up against. So that needs to be taken into consideration. When Clint talks about meeting with the chamber and having Chris Collins speak to them, that's something that I think would have been beneficial for our committee, to have had a chance to have had Chris in and talk to all of us as a committee. We passed these things down. We weren't part of that meeting, so we don't know what that consensus is. So there is a lot of information out there that we haven't gotten yet. And and all due respect to Joe, a lot of times taking more time is simply just taking more time. But when you look at what we have been presented so far, the way we've had to do this because of the unique situation brought on by the pandemic, we're not able to have meetings in a traditional manner. I know the schedule was to get this done by the meeting in October, but the pandemic kind of screws up a whole lot of schedules. I think there was a lot of discussion and a lot of things we could have done as a group together had we been able to meet in a traditional sense, and we haven't. And in my opinion, and the opinion of the other builders, we think as important as this is and as big of an impact as this can have on our economic development, it deserves that we spend more time together on this together. Once we get past all these restrictions that we're under to have these types of meetings, and get the data in that we don't have the meetings that we haven't had together, like with the chamber. There are just a lot of questions unanswered. We talked at our last meeting at the Builders Association, which you guys weren't part of. And one of the things that was brought up in that discussion was that there was going to be a handbook, a guidebook that would be put out on commercial fees as far as how they were going to be implemented, but we weren't going to see that guidebook until after the fees were already enacted. Well, I'd kind of like to see that guidebook before the fees get enacted, so we know how they're going to be implemented. And I know I speak for our other 3 construction members on the board, that we need to spend more time on the commercial side of it. The unintended consequences for that are if you're on our side of the industry, you understand what the unintended consequences can be on this.
Is it fair to say that I mean, I appreciate the builder's input, and I think we all do, and that you're not philosophically opposed to impact fees in and of themselves. And so I've truly appreciated the kind of the pragmatic side that y'all have brought to this. Is there some sense of kind of the ambiguity of the imposition of the commercial side? Like, we've got essentially fixed sums on the residential side. Is that, you know, kind of the idea of it being a ballooning cost that you can't control? Is that some of the concern?
There's a lot to do with it for me, I'll have to admit. The fact that, and I think Scott said it, there are peer cities that we have that have no fees and we don't know what their status will be 6 months or 2 years or 3 years from now, but Abilene, Beaumont, Bryant, San Angelo, Temple, Tyler, Wichita Falls, all have no impact fees right now and no consideration of any. And those are cities that we do go up against for commercial projects. And that's, I'm not saying that we can't do it. I just think all of us want to make sure that it doesn't become punitive and doesn't cost us businesses.
Other than our peer cities, we have Hewitt, Woodway, Robinson, Lacey Lakeview, Bellmead. That's just as easy for them to go and put together a project just a few miles away, or actually Hewitt and Woodway is basically within the city limits of Waco, and not pay an impact fee. And so we've got to make sure that we're not driving people out into those other communities.
This is maybe just a question to y'all, Friesen Nichols and staff. Is there, my perception would be that in terms of, you know, if you look at residential versus non-residential impacts upon just the overall infrastructure system, that the residential component taken as a whole, not on a per unit basis, that has the larger impact upon the infrastructure cost, generally speaking, to the city. Is that a correct assumption, or not? So
I would say that the bigger impact is on the non-residential side. And to Ken's point, the roads has some variability, and that's because of the travel characteristics by different land uses. Yeah, it'd be great if we had one trip generation rate for all the different kinds of uses, but the fact is it's just not there. Different uses generate traffic totally differently. So that's why there's the variability on the roads. So to the point, you know, there is a nice packaged cost for residential because we're able to do that. But in the non-residential, there's just so many variation in uses. And then, you know, we have dropped, or the structure that's been set up has dropped the collection rate for the non-residential side, along with all the other exemptions. So it's trying to create a balance there and what might work, but I don't think you could say that the residential is a larger trip generator than the non-residential.
And Eddie, you, in a lot of ways, you just articulated to me why we need to spend more time discussing commercial fees, because it is so much more complicated. There is so much more involved. There are so many, just like our last meeting where we looked at one 2,000 square foot building that initially had a $12,000 impact fee, and oh wait, well, we go back and kind of refigure it this way. Well, now it's 4,000, and so it's monumentally more complicated on the commercial side. So we've split our time, so to speak, even if we were 3/4 of our time has been spent on commercial, 1/4 on residential. We need to have a period of time where we spend 100% of our time focused on the commercial side of it and figuring out exactly how these are going to be implemented and what the impact is going to be. And we haven't been able to do that. So again, to your point, Josh, we are absolutely in no way, shape, or form opposed to the impact fees themselves. But we see the necessity for it, especially us residential guys. We know what the necessity of it is, and we depend on that consistent infrastructure in order to get people to buy our houses. So it is absolutely important that it be done, but I just don't see any reason why it has to be rushed, and it feels rushed to us. And when when we're this back and forth on how we're figuring things, you know, there's nothing magic about this council. The next city council can vote on this too. There's no need for us to rush this. I just, you know, I don't want to be in a situation where a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, we're scrambling to go back and redo something because we've lost a bunch of opportunities as a result of what we do today. And that to me is worthy of spending more time to make sure that doesn't happen.
Eddie, I think you also made a good point that commercial traffic sometimes is very different. We're talking about the, you know, the warehouses out here in the industrial district. You got 18 wheelers all day long moving in and out of those pieces of property. We don't have that except for concrete trucks that are going in and out of a subdivision, and eventually those quit running because it's done. But they don't quit running in those commercial areas that are impacted by those roadways. So I understand there's could be a significant difference based on the type of industry that we're talking about.
Yeah, so, you know, the travel characteristics of land uses are going to change. You know, the COVID thing is going to probably have an effect on folks traveling to and from with e-commerce and things, but that data is also going to be developed by ITE, others. You'll still have trip generation and the same question that's going to come up in 6 months. You know, some communities have gone to the ultimate extreme of collapsing a lot of uses under retail or a lot of uses under industrial. The disbenefit to that is that, well, heck, you know, I may be a furniture store getting tagged with a higher generation rate. So there's pros and cons to a collapsed equivalency table. We think it's better to have more, so that way it's specifically tailored. And Ken, to your comment there, yes, the variation, there is variation in commercial, but we've isolated that in that equivalency table. We've taken out traffic generation for traffic already on the system. In other words, pass-by trips, diverted trips. The commercial generation rate should be 3.86, 3.74, one of those two. It's down to 1.52. We've said we're not going to take a chance on tagging commercial with traffic already out there. There's already documentation of pass-by diverted. Let's take it out to focus on the primary trip. On the trip length side, we've cut those trips in half. So only half of the trip is being associated with commercial development. We've taken out travel or a percentage of travel on the overall network as a result of traffic on the federal system. So the equivalency table is, number one, it's truly tailored to Waco, but it's generally conservative in nature. And if the applicant feels that they have different generation data, they can certainly present it for staff to consider. The final thought is, I think we're, you know, sure, there's multiple service areas for roads because the law says, you know, the 6 miles, but we're not even at what, 30% of the credited rate, 60% of the overall 100. We've already reduced the thresholds, and then we're taking it at the 20% threshold in year 1, 40, 60, and so on to slowly ramp it up. There is the chance that, say, year 3 council sees, oh man, this is, you know, when we're at the 60% collection rate, that's 60% of 50%. When we're at year 3 and there's something looks out of whack, they can cause for us to look at this thing again. So true variability, but true a lot of conservative thought into the road piece itself. And the biggest reason for that is, the absolute biggest reason is the roadway network is open to others for use, right? Water and wastewater is closed. Know how many people are going to use the water system, the wastewater. The roads, you got people cutting through town, consuming capacity. China Springs, as growth happens in that Waco North sector over the next couple of years, there could be more development in the ETJ that consumes capacity of all those roads, which would wind up removing those projects. thereby potentially reducing that fee. It's an open system. Others are using it. And so we're already losing losing probably 20% of capacity due to existing traffic on the road. Okay, so just a couple of things there for thought, but you're going to have the variability because of those kinds of conditions. But I think the biggest piece is that the applicant has the ability to provide data for council consideration, or at least the city engineer consideration.
Yeah.
So-
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please, Clint.
Well, I would just, you know what, I think one of the reasons why we weren't able to find very many specific studies is because there's so many variables in play when you're looking at impact on an economy, and especially when businesses are looking to locate at a, you know, for a certain community, you know, you have things like labor costs and energy and transportation costs and land costs and construction costs and all the different things involved. And our thought was we felt like we've come up with a recommendation that not only addresses a lot of those concerns, but phases it in over time. We have an effective date that's about 6 months, over 6 months out there. It won't start till June 1st. And then a phase in that's over the 5 years. And we feel like if we're seeing things that are not positive, or they're causing these unintended consequences that we're talking about, we'll be able to pivot without having, measurable negative impacts on the economy because of the way we've got it structured, and the way we have it phased in over time, and then all the allowable exemptions based on some of the things we've talked about with local business and small business. My concern is if we push this off to have more study, that the study's really not going to give us that information that we would get if we started implementing it and reviewed it as we went through this phase-in policy that we've created.
So he may not be feeling, he didn't sound good.
May I make a comment? I'd like to take a minute to make a comment.
Pete, please do.
Okay, I'm just really surprised that no one here has talked about the impact of the virus, the COVID-19. Being in the construction business, we're looking at typically what we bid on in the future is about 60% private, 40% public works, maybe 65-35. It's dropped to 0 for private work. All we have now is public work to bid on. And if you're telling me you're getting ready to raise rates for commercial construction in the middle of all of this, with all of the unknowns that are coming up, I think we're making a huge mistake. If the residential people are okay with it, that's fine. I'll vote for that. But you won't get me voting for a institution of a commercial rate at this point in a situation that's so fragile. Thank you.
Finding that hard to believe with the number of people that.
Thank you so much, Pete. There's someone on the phone, Lisa Tyre, and I think there's some background chatter coming from her feed. If she could mute, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is, but thank you so much. All right. Okay, so Pete's note is taken. Are there any other committee members that would like to speak and be heard, or make any other comment before we entertain motions?
Josh, could I ask a quick question?
Please.
We've had, I think Eddie said we're at 7 meetings. We've learned a lot. We've processed a lot of information. Once this goes to council, do they have the benefit of that learning curve as they go into council to consider what we're bringing as the proposal?
Yeah, so they'll be able to consider staff's recommendation and then the commission's recommendation, whatever motions made with the commission. And then there is a public hearing scheduled for October 6th for the city council. And so they'll be able to take all of those factors into consideration when they make their decision for the ordinance at October 20th is when it's scheduled for the first reading of the ordinance.
Will those be virtual meetings or open meetings?
They're they're scheduled for virtual meetings.
I would have to say that they will get that they're, I think, relying to no small extent on what we've learned here, because you're just not going to get the benefit of some of the conversations that we've heard. So I would think they're not going to, it's not going to be the same. They're not going to have the benefit of the collective information that we've gotten. They'll have the recommendation, but they're not going to have go through this extensive 7-meeting process.
I think, you know, one thought I have just on the conversation around the commercial component is certainly, I think, you know, moving forward with something where, especially y'all on the builder side are uncertain, you know, is not what we want to do. But, you know, to Joe's point, and maybe to Enid's as well originally, like, I would have a reticence towards just pushing out without any sort of parameters we held ourselves to in terms of what we were looking for or a time frame. That's just sort of my inclination, is to not want to just have an open-ended delay without something that sort of articulates what we're looking for. And then we can, at that point, determine just straight up or down, do we want to recommend or not recommend, and versus kind of delaying and then it just kind of moving off into the ether and not actually being resolved. So
Yeah, I agree with that as well, you know.
Well, and that may also depend on kind of how the motion is made. And, you know, we can entertain a motion for a straight up and down approval. We can entertain a motion first for, you know, a partial approval and partial delay. We can take it up however we want. I mean, one way to do it is to kind of take up, I mean, if a motion is made along the lines that the builders have proposed and Pete has expressed and others have expressed some sympathy for, and if it, you know, passes, so be it, you know, and that's our recommendation. And if it fails, then we can take a straight up or down. I don't know if I'm really kind of hearing from what we're speaking of anything different than those two kind of perspectives in terms of how we should move forward procedurally. But unless anyone has anything else to say, I'm definitely willing to take up a motion. I would just ask Ms. Wharton, if you're going to take the role, if you don't mind, not that it would influence anyone, but if you don't mind, I'd prefer to vote last so as not to sway. Not that it would.
Sure.
Can I ask a question, please?
Please do.
If we vote to have a delay or have a continuation of study on the commercial, Clint, is it possible? I mean, in your estimation, were we having a time delay in implementation of those fees as well till next June, or were those going to be implemented immediately?
Well, ultimately, it's going to be up to city council and how, you know, they decide. You know, currently, the way the staff recommendation is that the fees would not be effective till June 1st of 2021. But ultimately, you know, the commission and our recommendations are just recommendations, and city council makes the final decision on it.
I think if we made a recommendation to delay the commercial fees, they would be delayed 6 months and to be implemented December 1st of 2021. That would make the most sense if you're going to vote for the 6-month delay.
is there some, maybe just to y'all, is there, I mean, is there, because I think really y'all are the ones who have the questions, both the knowledge and the vested interest in getting those questions asked. Is there some data that you like have in mind that you'd really be looking for? I just so that like we can get that data being pushed out as quickly as possible is maybe, because I don't know if I have the questions to ask during that period, but I'm not against that at all.
I think for me, and Herb and David may be able to speak better to this, I would just like to see more clarification on the implementation of the fees, on how they're going to be implemented. Something more than what we've already gone over, like we discussed at the last meeting of the Builders Association about there being a set guidelines that will be available for someone looking to come here to be able to go online, download, and see how the fees are going to be implemented. At this point, those guidelines aren't going to be available till after we pass this. And for me, I'd rather those be available to where we can study those before we pass it. Herb, David, I don't know if that was, if you guys have something more specific in mind, but that was what I had in mind.
And Scott, you're talking about the calculator tool that we're talking about at the meeting, where you have a website and you're able, as a builder, a developer, a property owner, go in there and put in your information.
Yeah, and also Clint too, like at the last meeting when we had one example where we had 2 different ways of calculating the fees. I just think we need to move past that and be more concrete about what we're actually going to be implementing.
Yeah. Well, and
we haven't had enough time to get there. We can get there, and we can get there. It's just going to take more time.
Yeah. Well, and I just, for clarity, when we were talking about that one last month or last meeting, the difference in the 2 fees was, meter size. And so that, those variables, that you plug in are going to change depending on the project. And especially when you're doing hypotheticals, that was a hypothetical scenario that we're talking about. And originally we had a 1.5 inch meter. And then, after we talked about it, well, I think it was an office building, most likely that wouldn't require an 1.5 inch and they would just need an inch. So, those types of variables are always going to be there. The calculator that will be implemented and, put in before the effective date of the ordinance will help developers and builders and property owners be able to calculate those fees, before, when they're making decisions about those things. But the variables will still be there no matter how you adopt the fees.
Hey, Clint, this is Benji. Can we commit ourselves to doing a kind of an annual revision or an annual review of anytime that we're implementing these impact fees? Can we see like how that is impacted whatever developments are in the pipeline? And can we do that, 5 years up until we have to review the impact fees again? And then just kind of do a comparison analysis to the previous 5 years, just so we have some data to support whatever decision we've made, and then, moving forward to whoever has to reevaluate it 5 years from now.
Sure, certainly the 5-year review it's by state law. Cities can review and evaluate before then. That the one thing I would say on the way we have it recommended, that the full implementation of the fee is going to take that first 5 years, because the way we have it phased. So you're not going to get the full picture until you fully have implemented it. Now you could do, kind of an interim 3-year look at it to see what impact it's having before that 5 years. But for a lot of our development, especially the stuff that's already in the pipeline, you're not going to have any fees for essentially 2.5 years, because we have a 6-month window for the effective date. And then for developments that are already platted, then they have a 2-year window where they're not paying impact fees for, a building permit. So we can definitely do that, and we can look at it, but you're not going to get the full picture until it's been fully implemented on the total impact of what the fee has on the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Clint, if I could add on, there's several roles of the advisory committee. One, to advise and assist the city on the adoption of the LUA, the CIPs, but it's also monitor and evaluate the implementation of the capital improvements plan, file semi-annual reports, advise the city of the need to revise or update LUA or CIPs and impact fee. So that's within your purview as the capital improvements advisory committee.
So I have a question of the builders. With that long runway that we have, including the 6 months that takes us out to June, and then the period where you're only going to have, we have a lot of exemptions, and you're going to see the 20% and then the 40%. would that not, first of all, I would question how we would accurately capture what a builder would do if they're faced with the full amount versus not. I don't know how you would capture that, because certainly if you asked me if I was going to have to pay 100% versus 20%, I'm going to say no, but I don't know what the validity of that is. And I'm not intending to be flippant. And so how could we not get sufficient data and not have enough caution built in the way that this is proceeding with some review if we approve this as it is, again, with that long runway for implementation and then full activation of the fee?
Enid, I guess I don't understand. What is your question?
The concern is that we need more study.
So the concern is on the non-residential side versus the residential side. I think on the residential side, we're okay with it. On the non-residential side, the thought is we need to put a little bit more time into it. Maybe goes back a little bit to Ross's question. I don't know if we're specifically looking for any more data, but it's just running through the various scenarios there are on the non-residential side. Those are almost endless. You know, even as of Friday with city staff meeting with the chamber and kind of talking about some of the effects on small business, there's a lot of scenarios to run through on the non-residential side that just need a little bit more thought and time put into them versus what we have today, because there could be some implications of some stuff that we're just simply not thinking of, that we haven't had a conversation with the Waco Business League, or maybe need to have a little bit more conversation with the chamber. So that's the hesitation. I don't think, I'm not going to speak for Herb, but on the commercial side, I don't think Herb has a fear of impact fees. He just wants to make sure that it's well vetted and well thought out, because there's a ton of scenarios on the non-residential side. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I can't say, Enid, you will have the impact with commercial fees can be immediate. As soon as council votes to adopt impact fees, we could have commercial interest looking to bring something here. When council enacts or adopts impact fees, they may back off and say, we can't get it done within the time frame to avoid having to pay those fees. So we're not going to go there. So you could have a pretty immediate reaction. And that's something you could go to the chamber. If you're talking about finding data after the fact, the chamber would be able to tell us pretty accurately on whether or not a company that was considering the Waco area took us off their list because we enacted impact fees. And that could happen from day one. And that would impact Herb, especially the guys that are actually would be tapped with building those projects. That's just revenue that they just never realize.
Right. And I guess we know, I mean,
those guys make decisions, 5, 6, 7 years down the road, well beyond this landing strip we've got. They're making those decisions well past that. And so the day after council votes to enact fees, we may lose projects the next day. May not. Again, it's something that we haven't discussed.
I would assume we know that there are going to be some projects that you will definitely lose, because you're going to have people who just don't want that additional cost. I mean, I think,
and in fairness, we could lose projects like that for any number of reasons, not just impact.
Right. Yeah.
So
I guess the other side of that is the balance of that is we could also pick up, if we have a funding source that helps balance some of those costs of infrastructure that we can put in, you're also potentially opening up land for development that wouldn't occur without the fees. So, I mean, there's that balance between the two that's hard to quantify impacts on, in theory, I guess, with a study that it's with all the variables, it's just hard to provide a study that would account for all that.
Well, candidly, I'm sitting here struggling on whether we just go ahead with the runway that's built in, or you got to move it out at least until April, because nothing is going to get done once you get into the holidays and January. Maybe I'm not thinking about that the right way.
Just as a, if you, Clint, if you can remind me, not only are those new developments able to sort of advocate that they will have less of an impact than maybe the calculator initially generates, but there are also mechanisms for where, not that you want to from the start have ways you can work around the impact fees, but like there's ways that those impact fees could be waived in the event that a project is, that we want to stay here does become in jeopardy as a result of them. Is that correct?
That's correct. So with the updating the tax abatement policy to include the impact fees, that does allow, new businesses that are coming in looking for incentives or different things to develop in Waco, or existing businesses, to apply not only for the tax abatement, but the fee waivers, and those can be evaluated and acted on a case-by-case basis by the city council, as they do their incentive packages with these economic development projects. And those do include new, and then also, retaining businesses as well.
Josh, I would make a motion to approve the residential impact fees as proposed. Table implementation of commercial impact fees for 6 months for further study. Move their implementation from June 1st to December 1st of 2021.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Blank.
Second that.
Stated it pretty well. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I would second that.
All right, Mr. Cooper seconds it. Do we have any discussion? All right, if not, please go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Scott, real quick, is it necessary to almost push it out a year? Is that's what? Discussion out another year on the commercial side. Could we not just say 6 months from today? And, kind of the second that we implement the residential fees, that's when we enact the commercial fees as well.
I would feel better about my suggestion. You could always back it up from December 1st. I just want to have a timeline on it.
Yeah.
I don't want it open-ended, but at the same time, I still want to have that time frame in there. Open-ended would be bad.
Right.
We can move it back to December later, but I think my proposal would be just to take that 6 months and just extend the 6 months from the end date. So they are separate.
And Eddie, for you and Jessica, if y'all could help us a little bit with your tables, understand, it may be that we just don't understand it enough to feel comfortable with recommending we go ahead with this, because that is so much more variability to it than the residential side has. And it might help us to understand that a little better as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Be more than happy to.
I don't know if I'm out of order, but I think if Ben made that as a motion, said that the extension was a little bit shorter, I'd be inclined to support that as well. And I realize we have a live motion that we got to vote on, but.
Okay, yeah, I think Scott made a motion for a 6-month study and then a year max delay on implementation. Is that right, Scott?
Josh, I like that wording. I think that might help Enid as well. That wording being the maximum time for implementation would be December 1st, 2021, which would allow us to implement them earlier. But we can't go beyond that. As by December 1st, 2021 at the latest.
Okay, and then Benji, talked about
Benji, does that
6 months, and I think Scott's standing by his motion. So, I mean, I suppose if, this motion were to fail and you want to make a, corresponding one, we could procedurally.
And Mr. Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
Since we have kind of a two-part motion, you think it would be beneficial maybe to separate them out and vote on the residential part and the commercial part separate, or do it all as one motion?
Yeah, I think that would probably be the easiest way to do it, because I think we've got broad agreement on that component, and then we can kind of hash out, you're saying just draw out commercial for a separate series of votes?
Yes, sir.
Scott, are you comfortable with us taking up your motion and making it just a commercial motion to be voted on?
Yes,
later?
yes.
I mean,
And
at this meeting.
And I'm also comfortable with amending my motion to be by December 1st, 2021 at the latest,
Okay,
to give that ability for us to do it sooner if we were comfortable doing it sooner.
okay.
So yes, I am. I'm fine. Let's do the vote on residential first.
All right. Do we have just a vote straight up or down on residential only? A motion, I'm sorry.
Sure, I'll make a motion that we approve staff recommendations on the residential impact fee considerations.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I think I caught a motion by Mr. Mercer, second by Scott Bland. Do we have any discussion on just our standalone approval of residential? All right, hearing none, would you please poll the committee?
Benjamin Gomez,
Yes.
Enid Wade,
Yes.
Jason Ramos,
Yes.
Jed Cole,
Yes.
Joe Mayfield,
Yes.
Kim Kazanis,
Yes.
Peter Gretzinger,
Yes.
Ross Harris,
Yes.
Tara Briscoe,
Yes.
David Mercer,
Yes.
Herb Cross,
Yes.
Ken Cooper,
Yes.
Scott Bland,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Oh, and Josh Bordery.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. We'll go as a recommendation to adopt staff's recommendation as to residential implementation of impact fees per Mr. Mercer's motion. So what we're left with now is commercial. And Scott, do you want to re-urge your motion in that regard? And Ken, do you want to second that same motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have any further discussion on Mr. Bland's motion as it stands?
Hey, Josh, just to clarify, Scott is making a motion for commercial fees for a study to be pushed out to December 1 of 2021 as the maximum time period.
The motion is to table consideration of commercial construction impact fees for 6 months discussion for a vote to be taken on implementation no later than December 1st of 2021.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Yes.
Would there be a second public hearing on the commercial impact fees? So we'd move forward with the residential impact fee public hearing on the 6th, and then we would have a separate public hearing on commercial. Is
Yeah,
that
I would
right?
assume so. And that's why my motion is for a 6-month study period to be voted on no later than December 1st of 2021, because I don't know how long it's going to take after that 6-month research period to get in front of a council for reading and all those things.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that's why I put the December 1st, 2021 instead of June 1st.
Right.
I think I might have been mistaken. I was under the assumption that we were delaying the vote for 6 months and then implementations no later than 6 months following that.
Yes, that, no,
Was that
that was my
incorrect?
intention that we, after our 6 months of study, our group will vote on it. But council would have up until December 1st of 2021 to implement.
Any further discussion on this motion? Oh, Ken, we can't.
Just like Ross, they're gonna vote on them the way it is right now by staff recommendation. They're gonna vote on them in November with implementation on June 1st.
So we're just
My
essentially,
motion is we're a 6-month study period for council to vote on approval by December 1st, 2021, or enact implementation by December 1st, 2021.
Right.
Now, when
okay,
council
so we're
does that,
essentially just pushing
sometime in
everything
that-
back 6 months.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yep, sorry about that.
No.
No, thank you. That, I thought that's what you meant, but that would clarify. Thank you.
Any other comment or discussion on this motion?
So if I could, by tabling it, is the public hearing held open?
So this is just a recommendation to council. So council makes the final decision. So if they go with the CIAC recommendation, then it would be, the commercial part of it would be tabled and for a further study. And then we come back to the advisory committee for a recommendation on the commercial, back to the same process. But the council just, you know, for everybody's information, the council could decide to go ahead and implement them, you know, if on the schedule we're on right now, if that's their decision.
Just one additional point of editorializing, just to Pete's point, in 5-6 months, we also may have a better feel for what sort of the long-term impact of pandemic looks like as well. You know, like we're not, I don't know, maybe we're technically 6 months into it, but we're barely 6 months. So that 6 month window, we may be able to glean a little bit more what's going to happen into the future as well. So
I think that's a good point. We ought to consider that.
All right.
Is there a second?
I believe Mr. Cooper is the second. Is that correct? Yeah. All right. With that, would you please poll the committee?
Benjamin Gomez,
Yes.
Enid Wade,
Yes.
Jason Ramos,
No.
Jed Cole,
No.
Joe Mayfield,
No.
Kim Kazanis,
Yes.
Pete Gretzinger,
Yes.
Ross Harris,
yes.
Tara Briscoe,
Yes.
David Mercer,
Yes.
Herb Cross,
Yes.
Ken Cooper,
Yes.
Scott Bland,
Yes.
Josh Borderood,
Yes. Motion carries. It'll go as a recommendation as stated by Mr. Bland, essentially delaying study and implementation for about a 6 month period total. That, I believe, at least in the short term and hopefully for a few months, wraps up our work. Mr. Peters, is there anything else we need to take up here today?
No, sir. I just wanted to thank y'all all again. I know this has been a lot of work and we really do appreciate y'all's time and careful consideration in this important endeavor. Thank y'all.
I think from the builders community, we'll say that right back to you, Clint. You guys have been very open and willing to have a lot of additional meetings outside of these meetings, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is this going to be heard by the city council tomorrow evening?
No, so there's a work session and public hearing scheduled for the October 6th meeting. This is the 5th Tuesday, so they don't have a meeting tomorrow night.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Clint.
Thanks to city staff. Thank you, Freeze and Nichols, for all your good work in helping us understand this. And thanks to all the members of the committee as well. It's been a pleasure serving with y'all on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.